Good evening. Today, I wanted to talk about the distinction between representation versus reality, or appearance versus essence. And this came up while I was teaching my course earlier this evening, the anthropology of the Middle East. And of course, it's not only relevant to the course that I am teaching, but also to so much more in the social, natural, and physical areas of knowledge that we study, that we think about, we talk about, we write about, and we research about. But since I am mainly concerned with social sciences and humanities, I'll limit the application to that area. Um, Representation or appearance is um, what we think um, things are, places are, people are, or issues are. And reality is, of course, uh, not um, what representation necessarily describes. Now, this is not something new, of course. Philosophers, artists have talked about it for centuries. For example, the Belgian artist Rene Magritte uh, painted or a picture of a pipe, and he wrote underneath the picture or painting. Um, it's a smoking pipe, and he says, or the text says, this is not a pipe or this is not a smoking pipe. Um, of course, it is a pipe, but it is a pipe in picture. It is not a real pipe such as this one, right? Which you can use to smoke and whatever you want to smoke in, but you can use this. This is an actual real pipe. So Magritte um, wanted to um, highlight this distinction between representation or images and reality, or appearance and essence. Uh, and in a way, it makes sense when he said, this is not a pipe, because it is not a pipe, right? It is not an actual pipe. Um, but it seems to us that it is a pipe because it's an image of a pipe, right? Um, Now, this, of course, is something that has been contended with by philosophers during Magritte's time and before him. For example, I think Nietzsche has talked about it. I'm sure others have talked about it. Jacques Derrida, the French philosopher, French names are notoriously difficult to pronounce. He is known as one of the philosophers for deconstruction. In fact, he is the pioneer of deconstruction, or the thought of deconstruction, which for some falls under postmodernity or postmodernism, which rejected, the idea of grand totalizing ideas or ideologies or narratives about um, things. Um, and the Derridian critique was that language itself, words, language itself is a metaphor. Um, it's a symbol, and I don't necessarily uh, quote him or his ideas, but the gist or the spirit of the critique was that language, and it is much more complicated or complex than I am probably describing, but the sort of simple or um, short understanding of his ideas was that language and words, they are metaphors, they are symbols, and they don't necessarily um, represent the the meaning or the reality of things. And it kind of struck me while engaging with this thought, because it makes a lot of sense to me, um, for a couple of reasons. One is that, as the Libyan novelist Hisham Matar, in one of his interviews, said in response to a question by someone in the audience, he said, he writes about silence. He writes from silence, and that makes so much sense. If you think about words, language, books, they are symbols, they are metaphors, um, they are representations and images, um, or representation, I should say, of silences, silences in the head, silences in the chest, silences in the gut, silences in the heart. And these words, the language is metaphorical, it's symbolic, it stands to represent things, but it is not the things it represents, right? It represents um, the silence of the writer, it represents the silence of the speaker, it represents our collective silence. And it is a phenomenally, incredibly sophisticated tool that we use to convey, to construct meaning. But at the same time, we have to be mindful and careful that in the end, it is, if anything, a provisional meaning of reality, right? Um, Now, you maybe even can ask, then what is reality, right? Maybe there is no reality. Maybe it is an illusion. Maybe there is one, but maybe it is constantly shifting. The socio-political, the socio-cultural, the socio-historical reality, and us in the midst of it, is constantly shifting, is constantly changing, and we are constantly wrestling with the changing dynamics of not only the the external collective reality, but also of our own internal worlds. And if anything, language in the end is a symbolic representation of the feelings and the meanings that we carry inside ourselves. And then you may also ask, why even bother? Why bother to do this, right? I think that would be, or that is a beautiful question, and I don't know if I know the answer or anybody knows the answer, but I feel like we cannot help but to pursue the quest to try to understand better, and uh, to know better, and to, I think, um, of course, not give up. And the beauty is that, um, that we have, probably on a lighter note, we have things to do. We have always things to do, things to know, and that's not such a bad thing. But I think the philosophical significance is that, uh, reality and representation carry, um, you know a lot of importance in how we engage with the text, how we engage with the written word, how we reflect on it, and how do we relate it to the world around us, and how do we use it to understand the images in the representations created by language about people, about the world, about society and communities around us, and to hopefully uh, reach a much more kinder, humanistic, and a, um, a humane way of um, being in the world, and not just in understanding it, but also in contributing to its understanding. Hopefully, this makes sense, and I'll see you again. Bye.